Welcome to the Eclipse Horror Stories. If you are new here, just hit the like button and subscribe button. Let's dive into the story. They say every toy is created with one purpose: to bring joy. A doll is supposed to comfort, a teddy bear to protect, a little figurine to make us smile. Toys are companions, especially in childhood. They sit on our shelves, in our beds, and in our memories long after we've grown. But what happens when a toy doesn't want to comfort? What happens when a toy wants something darker? For centuries, objects have been blamed for strange and terrifying things. Superstitions about cursed items run deep across cultures. Mirrors that trap souls, paintings that drive owners to madness, jewelry that brings only misfortune. And dolls, perhaps more than any other object, carry with them an uncanny power. They look like us. They sit quietly, staring with glassy eyes that never close, never blink, but always watch. Dolls, more than anything, invite the question, what if it's alive? There are real-world examples that people still whisper about today. Annabelle, locked in a glass case in Connecticut's famous Warren Occult Museum, is said to have attacked people who mocked her. Robert the doll, kept in Key West, Florida, is blamed for decades of accidents, ruined lives, and untimely death. And around the world, stories of dolls whispering, moving, and changing positions in the night are told again and again. But among these legends, one story has begun to emerge in hushed corners of the internet. A story not about porcelain antiques or ragged voodoo dolls, but about something deceptively modern, bright, cartoonish, cute. A story about a doll with a smile too wide, ears too long, and teeth that look far too sharp for something meant for children. The Labubo Doll. Marketed as a quirky collectible, it was supposed to be a harmless toy, designed to be more funny than frightening. And yet, scattered online are reports of people who claimed their Labubo brought with it something sinister. Strange illnesses, sudden outbursts of violence, pets reacting violently, nightmares of clawed creatures grinning in the dark. At first, these stories were easy to dismiss, just urban legends in the making. But then came the story of a woman in Portland, Oregon, whose love of toys and collectibles led her to cross paths with the wrong Labubo. Unlike the others, hers wasn't brightly colored pink, green, or blue. It wasn't a cheap knockoff from a mall kiosk. This one was different. Its fur was golden, shimmering faintly under the light, as though it wanted to be noticed. And once it found her, it never let go. This is the story of Emily Carter, a story that begins with laughter, photographs, and late-night shopping bags, but ends in silence, blood, and a mystery that still hasn't been solved. A story that reminds us that evil doesn't always show itself with snarling faces and shadows in the dark. Sometimes it arrives in packaging with a smile printed on the box. Sometimes it comes home with you willingly. So before we begin, I want you to ask yourself one question. Have you ever owned something, a toy, a trinket, a gift, that felt wrong? Maybe your dog growled at it. Maybe it gave you headaches when you kept it near. Maybe it moved when you swore you hadn't touched it. What if it wasn't your imagination? What if it was waiting for you to notice it? Because tonight, we're diving into the story of the Labubo Doll. And by the end, you might just wish you'd never heard its name. Our story begins in Portland, Oregon, a city known for its coffee shops, rainy days, and quirky culture. For Emily Carter, a 26-year-old toy store employee, Portland was the perfect place to live. She had always been fascinated by toys, not just as a child but into adulthood. To Emily, toys weren't just plastic or porcelain objects. They were works of art, tiny pieces of joy captured in bright colors and stitched smiles. Her one-bedroom apartment was a reflection of that love. Porcelain dolls lined a cabinet in her living room, each one carefully dusted. Plush toys filled her bed, arranged in neat rows. Action figures and collectibles were displayed on shelves like a miniature museum. Visitors often teased her, saying she lived in a toy store. Emily didn't mind. Her toys gave her comfort, a sense of safety in a world that often felt overwhelming. But among all the toys she collected, she never expected her most prized possession would become her biggest mistake. It happened on an ordinary Wednesday evening. Emily's shift at the downtown toy shop had been quiet. She and her coworker, Rachel, spent most of the afternoon unpacking a new shipment. Inside one of the boxes, beneath layers of bubble wrap, Emily found something unusual: a Labubo doll. Labubo was a line of collectible dolls that had recently grown popular online. Unlike traditional cute plushies, these dolls had strange proportions: oversized heads, enormous ears, and wide mouths filled with cartoonishly sharp teeth. Most people found them funny, some even endearing, but others admitted the designs unsettled them. The doll Emily pulled from the box was different from the rest. While the others came in bright, playful colors, neon green, soft pink, sky blue, this one was golden. Its fur shimmered faintly under the store lights, almost metallic. Its round eyes were a striking icy blue, and its grin seemed wider. Rachel frowned the moment she saw it. God, that thing's creepy. Looks like it's plotting something. Emily laughed, brushing off her coworker's unease. It's just a toy. They're supposed to be weird. That's the whole point. But even as she said it, she couldn't tear her eyes away. Something about the doll fascinated her. It felt rare, one of a kind, as if it had been waiting for her. Without hesitation, she set it aside and decided she'd buy it for herself. That night, after finishing her shift, Emily carried the golden Labubo home in a paper bag, humming as the rain pattered softly against the pavement. She placed it proudly on her bedroom shelf, snapping photos to post online. New addition to the family, she captioned the picture, adding a smiley face. Her golden retriever, Buddy, wandered into the room as she worked. Normally, Buddy adored her toys, nosing them playfully or curling up beside them. But when his eyes fell on the Labubo, his reaction was instant. His ears flattened, his tail tucked between his legs, and he began to growl, a deep, uneasy growl she had never heard from him before. "Buddy, it's just a toy," Emily said, crouching to pet him, but the dog wouldn't calm down. He barked furiously at the doll, teeth bared, until Emily finally carried him out of the room and shut the door. For the first time since she'd brought him home as a puppy, Buddy refused to sleep in the bedroom. That night, he lay outside her door, whining softly, as though he wanted to protect her from something. Emily rolled her eyes, telling herself dogs bark at vacuums, at shadows, even at their own reflections. She slipped under the covers, the Labubo grinning from its new perch on her shelf. Yet as she drifted off, a strange thought settled in her mind. Why did it feel like the doll was watching her? She woke several times that night, heart racing, sure she'd heard footsteps in the apartment. Each time, she told herself it was nothing but the building settling, the pipes creaking, the rain tapping against the windows. But the sense of being watched never left her. When morning came, Emily found Buddy still outside the bedroom door, his nose pressed to the crack, his eyes wide. Inside, the Labubo sat exactly where she had left it, its smile frozen, its blue eyes gleaming faintly in the light of dawn. Emily tried to laugh it off. She was an adult, not a child. She didn't believe in haunted dolls or cursed objects. But deep down, A sliver of unease had already taken root. And if she had listened to Buddy that night, maybe things would have been different. But she didn't. And the Labubo had only just begun. For the first few days, Emily tried to treat the golden Labubo like any of her other collectibles. She posed it with her other dolls, took photos, and even joked online that she'd found her shiny rare. On the surface, nothing seemed unusual, but the longer the doll stayed in her apartment, the more cracks began to appear in Emily's life. It started small. Her normally cheerful personality took a sharp turn. At the toy store, Emily snapped at customers who asked simple questions. Rachel noticed the change almost immediately. "You're on edge lately," she said one evening as they closed the shop. "You okay?" Emily forced a smile. "Just tired. Long shifts, that's all." But even as she said it, her hands trembled. She hadn't been sleeping well. The dreams were the reason. Every night, she found herself trapped in a recurring nightmare. She was back in her bedroom, lying in bed, while something moved in the corner. A figure hunched and twisted, its long ears brushing the floor, its teeth gleaming in the dark. The figure laughed softly, a high-pitched cackle that grew louder as it crept toward her. Emily would wake in a sweat, heart pounding, sometimes screaming. Each time, she would glance at her shelf, and the Labubo would be there, smiling, its wide blue eyes catching the faint light from the street outside. But one night, the dream bled into reality. Emily awoke with a jolt to find the doll was no longer on the shelf. It was sitting on her chest. Her scream tore through the silence. Buddy crashed through the half-open door, barking wildly. The golden retriever lunged, knocking the doll from her chest and tearing at it with his teeth. Emily, shaking, snatched the doll away before Buddy could destroy it completely. She stuffed it into a drawer, slamming it shut as Buddy snarled. Her hands were trembling so badly she could barely breathe. She told herself she must have moved the doll in her sleep. Maybe she'd been half dreaming, half awake. That had to be it. But deep down, she knew better. Buddy refused to leave her side after that. Every time Emily even touched the drawer, he barked and growled. His golden fur bristled whenever she stepped into the bedroom. He began sleeping in the hall again, as though guarding her from something inside. The following day at work, Emily broke down. A customer asked if the store carried a particular action figure, and she screamed at them, voice raw and shaking. Rachel pulled her aside, horrified. "What the hell is going on with you?" I don't know," Emily whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "I don't feel like myself." Rachel hesitated, then lowered her voice. "Is it that doll?" Emily froze. "What do you mean?" Rachel glanced around before answering. "Ever since you brought it home, you've been different. You're mean. Tired. Like it's sucking the life out of you." Emily laughed weakly, but it didn't sound convincing. "It's just a toy." Rachel didn't look convinced. "Then get rid of it." That night, Emily tried. She pulled the Labubo from the drawer, staring at its wide grin. For the first time, she noticed its mouth looked sharper than before, its smile stretched too far. The golden fur felt damp in her hands, as though it had been sitting in water. Her skin crawled. She shoved the doll into a garbage bag, tied it shut, and carried it to the dumpster behind her apartment. She tossed it in without looking back, telling herself it was over. But the next morning, when she woke, the Labubo was back on the shelf. Emily's blood ran cold. She tore the room apart looking for a second doll, another golden one that might have slipped into her collection. But no, there was only one. The same one she had thrown away. She sat on the bed, staring at it for hours, her mind unraveling. She whispered to herself, "It's just a toy. It's just a toy." That night, Buddy refused to enter the apartment at all. He sat outside the door, whining, scratching at the wood, until Emily finally broke down and cried with him. Something was wrong with the doll. Something inside it. And Emily was beginning to realize she was trapped with it. Emily's apartment no longer felt like her home. Every shadow seemed thicker, every sound sharper. She caught herself flinching at the creak of the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, even the ticking of the clock on her wall. None of it felt natural anymore. The Labubo sat on her bedroom shelf, grinning, unchanged yet somehow different each time she looked at it. Some nights its eyes seemed darker, the whites swallowed by endless blue. Other nights its smile seemed wider, the corners of its mouth stretching unnaturally far. Emily tried to convince herself she was imagining it, but when she compared photos she'd taken the night she brought it home, there was no denying it. The doll had changed. Buddy was the first real victim. One morning, Emily found him cowering in the bathroom, tail tucked, his body trembling violently. She crouched to comfort him, but when she touched his fur, her hand came away damp with blood. A series of claw-like scratches raked across his side, deep and raw, as though he'd been attacked by something with long, sharp nails. Emily rushed him to the vet, but no one could explain how he'd gotten the wounds. Maybe a raccoon or another dog, the vet offered gently. But Emily shook her head. He doesn't go outside without me. He was inside. He never left the apartment. That night, she woke to the sound of Buddy whimpering. When she flipped on the lamp, her heart froze. The Labubo wasn't on the shelf. It was sitting at the foot of her bed, its tiny fabric hands resting on Buddy's back as he struggled beneath its weight. Emily screamed, grabbed the doll, and hurled it across the room. Buddy scrambled under the bed, refusing to come out. The Labubo landed face up, its grin sharper, wider, its eyes gleaming faintly in the dim light. Emily didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next day, desperate for answers, she turned to the internet. She scoured forums, Reddit threads, and obscure paranormal blogs. To her horror, she wasn't the first to experience this. Scattered posts described similar encounters with Labubo dolls. Pets acting violently, owners suffering from rashes and mysterious illnesses, objects moving on their own. One particular thread caught her attention. A man claimed he'd bought a Labubo for his niece. Within a month, the girl was hospitalized with unexplained seizures. The doll, he wrote, had been found perched on her pillow the night she collapsed, even though he swore he'd locked it in the attic days before. Another post described a young boy who began whispering in his sleep after receiving a Labubo as a gift. The parents recorded him one night and were horrified to hear the child speaking in a guttural, ancient language no one recognized. They burned the doll the next day. The most disturbing account, however, came from a woman in Louisiana. She described a golden Labubo, just like Emily's. She claimed the doll was tied to an ancient Mesopotamian spirit, a demon of famine and disease. The name she used made Emily's skin crawl, Pazuzu. According to the post, the golden Labubo wasn't a mass-market toy at all. It was something else, something made deliberately as a vessel. The woman claimed she tried to burn hers, but the ashes reformed into the doll by morning. She ended her post with a chilling warning. It doesn't want to be destroyed. It wants to stay with you. And if you let it, it will take everything. Emily slammed her laptop shut, her pulse racing. She couldn't breathe. It was insane, it had to be, but it explained everything. Buddy's wounds, the nightmares, the anger that boiled inside her for no reason. That night, she decided she wouldn't just throw it away again. She would destroy it. She waited until midnight, when the city was quiet and the rain fell heavy against her windows. She dragged the Labubo outside, carrying it in a trash bag so she didn't have to feel its damp fur against her hand. In the alley behind her apartment, she doused the bag in lighter fluid, struck a match, and set it ablaze. Flames roared, the smell of burning plastic and fabric filling the air. Emily stood there, watching the fire devour the doll, tears streaming down her face. When the bag collapsed into ash, she felt an overwhelming wave of relief. She swept the remains into a jar, sealed it, and drove to the Willamette River. Standing on the bridge, she hurled the jar into the rushing water below, watching it vanish into the black current. For the first time in weeks, she slept soundly. No nightmares, no whispers, no sense of being watched. But the peace didn't last. The next morning, she woke to the sound of Buddy barking wildly. Heart pounding, Emily stumbled into the living room. There, sitting neatly on the shelf where it had always been, was the golden Labubo. Its grin was wider than ever, and this time its hands were stained red. Emily stared at the doll in disbelief, her chest heaving as panic clawed at her throat. She had burned it. She had scattered the ashes into the river with her own hands. There was no way the Labubo could have returned. And yet there it was, golden fur gleaming faintly in the morning light. Wide blue eyes locked on her. A grin stretched too far, almost splitting its face. And now those little fabric hands were smeared with something dark, something wet. Her eyes darted to Buddy. The golden retriever was standing stiffly in the doorway, barking and growling, hackles raised. Emily dropped to her knees beside him, frantically checking his fur. To her relief, the blood wasn't his. He was unhurt. But then, whose was it? A sharp knock on the door made her flinch. She scrambled up, peering through the peephole. It was Rachel, holding 2 coffees. Emily opened the door with trembling hands, pulling her friend inside before she could even say hello. Rachel frowned as she set the coffees down. You look awful. What's going on?" Emily's voice cracked. "It's the doll. I burned it, Rachel. I burned it and threw it into the river. But it's back. Look." Rachel turned toward the shelf and froze. Her face went pale. "Oh my God!" The 2 women stood there, staring at the Labubo in silence. The air in the room grew heavy, pressing down on them like a weight. Rachel swallowed hard. "You need to get rid of it again. Maybe we call someone. A priest. A paranormal group. I don't know." Before she could finish, the lights flickered. A low, guttural sound filled the room, like laughter dragged through broken glass. Emily's stomach twisted. The sound wasn't coming from the walls or the vents. It was coming from the doll. Buddy lunged forward, teeth bared, but the Labubo moved before their eyes. 1 second it was on the shelf, the next it was on the floor, standing upright. It tilted its oversized head toward Buddy, the grin splitting wider, revealing rows of jagged, needle-like teeth that hadn't been there before. Emily screamed. Rachel grabbed her arm, yanking her toward the door. But before they could reach it, the doll darted across the floor in a blur of impossible speed. It leapt, claws extended, tearing across Buddy's side. The retriever yelped in agony, collapsing to the ground. Emily dropped to her knees, sobbing as she tried to pull Buddy into her arms. The dog's breaths were shallow, labored, blood staining his golden fur. The Labubo just stood there, inches away, its head twitching as it whispered something in a language Emily couldn't understand. The words slid into her ears like poison, making her head spin, making her stomach churn. Rachel grabbed a lamp from the table and swung it down on the doll with all her strength. The Labubo flew across the room, crashing into the wall. But when it hit the floor, it landed on its feet, still smiling. That was when Emily saw it. The doll wasn't stuffed anymore. Its body shifted unnaturally, like something was crawling beneath the fabric. Its grin widened as its jaw split further, fabric tearing to reveal something wet and glistening inside. Rachel screamed. "It's not a doll, it's a thing." The Labubo lunged again, knocking Rachel to the ground. Emily grabbed the lamp from her friend's hands and smashed it into the creature repeatedly. Once, twice, 3 times. The bulb shattered, sparks flying. The doll screeched, the sound shrill and inhuman, making the walls vibrate. Emily dragged Rachel to her feet, half carrying her toward the door. But when she twisted the knob, the door wouldn't open. It was as if something on the other side was holding it shut. The air grew colder, the lights flickering violently. The whispers grew louder, filling every corner of the room, overlapping voices speaking in that same ancient tongue. Rachel clawed at the door, sobbing. "It won't let us leave." Emily turned, eyes wild. The Labubo stood in the center of the room now, its grin stretching impossibly wide, its eyes glowing faintly. It lifted one clawed hand and pointed directly at her. Her blood ran cold. This wasn't just a curse. This wasn't just a haunted toy. It wanted her. With a surge of adrenaline, Emily grabbed Buddy, cradling his trembling body against her chest. She screamed at Rachel. "The window!" Rachel didn't hesitate. She smashed through the glass with a chair, shards raining onto the wet pavement below. Together, they climbed out, Emily clutching Buddy tightly, Rachel bleeding from her hands. Behind them, the whispers crescendoed into a roar. And then, silence. When they hit the ground outside, panting and crying, Emily dared to look up at the shattered window. The Labubo was gone, but its laughter still echoed in her head. Emily and Rachel never spoke of that night the same way again. They couldn't. Even sitting in the emergency room with Rachel's bloody hands bandaged and Buddy being stitched up, they couldn't make sense of it. Every time Emily tried to explain, the words caught in her throat. "It wasn't a toy anymore," she whispered once. "It was alive." But Rachel didn't want to hear it. She never came back to Emily's apartment again. In fact, she begged Emily to move out, to throw away everything she owned, to never look back. Emily promised she would. She even believed it. For a few days afterward, her apartment felt eerily normal. The shelf where the Labubo had once sat was empty. The whispers were gone. The nightmares, though, continued, visions of sharp teeth in the dark, of long ears brushing the floor as something crawled closer and closer to her bed. Then, less than a week later, the silence shattered. Neighbors reported hearing Emily scream in the middle of the night. A raw, bone-chilling scream that carried through the walls of the apartment building. One neighbor claimed he heard something else too, a high-pitched laugh, like a child's giggle twisted into something monstrous. By the time police arrived, it was too late. Emily was found on the floor of her bedroom, her body covered in deep lacerations. The walls were streaked with claw marks. Buddy was lying beside her, unmoving. And there, on the shelf where Emily had once proudly displayed her collection, sat the Labubo doll. Golden fur unburned, wide blue eyes glimmering faintly in the flashlight beams, and a grin sharper than ever. Police officers, hardened men and women who'd seen the worst of humanity, refused to stay in that room longer than they had to. One officer swore he saw the doll turn its head to follow him as he bagged evidence. Another said he felt something whisper in his ear, though no one else was near. The official report ruled Emily's death as an animal attack, though no one could explain how a wild animal had gotten into her locked apartment. Buddy was listed as the likely cause, despite the fact that the injuries on Emily's body looked nothing like dog bite. Rachel, devastated, tried to tell investigators the truth. But who would believe her? A doll with claws and teeth? A toy that came back after being burned? It sounded insane. And yet, the Labubo vanished. By the time evidence was processed, the golden doll was gone from the property room. No officer could account for its disappearance. It simply wasn't there anymore. Some whispered that one of the cops had taken it, curious, thinking it was just another piece of harmless merchandise. Others said it walked out on its own. To this day, no one knows where the golden Labubo is. Some claim it surfaces on eBay every few years, disguised among normal Labubo collectibles. Buyers report packages arriving with the wrong doll inside: golden fur, wide smile, icy eyes. Some say the doll moves houses by itself, carried like a plague from owner to owner, leaving only tragedy behind. And if the stories are true, it's still out there now, waiting for someone else to take it home. Emily's story isn't just about a cursed doll. It's a warning. Evil doesn't always wear the face of a monster hiding in the shadows. Sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it's soft, colorful, and seemingly harmless, until you realize it's too late. So the next time you're in a toy store, scrolling through collectibles online, or picking out a gift for someone you love, look twice. If you see a doll with a smile too wide, ears too long, and teeth just a little too sharp, don't take it home. Because some toys aren't meant to be loved. Some toys are meant to find you. Now it's your turn. Do you think dolls like the Labubo could really be cursed? Have you ever owned something that felt wrong, like it carried a presence of its own? Tell me your story in the comments. I'll be reading them all. And if this story gave you chills, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell icon so you never miss another terrifying tale. Because tonight's story may have ended, but tomorrow, another toy might be waiting on another shelf. And when it smiles at you, will you smile back? If yes, comment below.